Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, November 7th. We start tonight in Ontario, where a bitter dispute between the government and education workers may be one step closer to resolving. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is stepping back from his controversial education worker legislation that included using the notwithstanding clause. Mr. Ford says he is willing to repeal the legislation if the Canadian Union of Public Employees shows a similar gesture of good faith and stops its strike. The Conservative government's Bill 28 not only imposed a contract on the 55,000 workers, but also banned their right to strike. The union says its protest sites will be collapsed starting tomorrow. Several school boards have said they will reopen for in-person learning on Tuesday. All right, well, meanwhile, Quebec's highest court is hearing appeals of Bill 21, the secularism law. Opponents of the bill are challenging a 2021 court decision that largely upheld the controversial religious symbols law. A Superior Court justice ruled last year that the law has serious and negative effects on people who wear religious symbols, but it is largely legal and does not violate the Constitution. The latest developments in the Emergencies Act inquiry saw Ontario's Premier and Deputy Premier being provided immunity from testifying. A federal court judge has ruled that Doug Ford and Sylvia Jones have immunity provided by parliamentary privilege. The commission is examining the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act. This was to end the so-called Freedom Convoy protests last winter in Ottawa and Windsor, Ontario. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkins testified today. He told the commission that he alerted Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino about a potential blockade at the busy Ambassador Bridge border crossing as soon as he first got wind of it. The Canadian Armed Forces says it is investigating the death of a Winnipeg-based soldier who was serving in Iraq. Captain Eric Chung died on Saturday in Baghdad under what the military is calling non-operational related circumstances. In a statement, the military says Captain Chung was working as an operations officer with the 38th Canadian Brigade Group headquarters in Winnipeg. An investigation into the details is underway. The Competition Tribunal opened public hearings today on Rogers' $26 billion proposed takeover of Shaw. The hearings are expected to last 4 weeks. Rogers and Shaw are hoping to close the deal by year's end. But the Competition Bureau has doubled down on its intention to block it. It states that it believes the merger will lead to worse services and higher prices for consumers. On the East Coast, a strike by 600 school support workers in Nova Scotia's Annapolis Valley could be coming to an end. A tentative deal was reached on Sunday between the Nova Scotia government and General Employees Union and the province. The agreement is being recommended for acceptance by the Support Workers Bargaining Committee. Some Ontario commuters are likely looking at their options for getting around today. This comes after the union representing some GO Transit workers launched a strike overnight. The job action affects bus drivers, station attendants, and other employees. It comes after the union and the employer Metrolinx failed to secure a new contract during weekend talks. The strike does not affect train service, and stations are open. A system-wide outage at WestJet over the weekend caused plenty of chaos. The Calgary-based airline says another 31 flights were canceled today. This is due to the effects of the system outage, along with winter weather affecting parts of Western Canada. Chief Operating Officer Deirdre Penn released a statement on Sunday. It said the outage was caused by a cooling issue in its primary data center, and more than 200 flights had to be canceled. The company apologized to its customers for the inconvenience. Canadian scientists are hoping to convince world leaders that a major player in helping to battle climate change lies in our oceans. Professor Anya Waite of Nova Scotia's Dalhousie University is leading a delegation at COP27, the UN's climate conference, which got underway today in Egypt. Professor Waite says they are hoping to persuade the world that the world's oceans have a crucial role to play in fighting climate change. They are planning to share ways that the deep blue carbon sink acts as a buffer and impacts climate forecasts. The Toronto Argonauts and Winnipeg Blue Bombers are hosting the CFL's East and West Finals on Sunday, and now they know who they'll be facing. The Argos will play the Montreal Alouettes, while the two-time defending champion Blue Bombers will face the BC Lions. The Grey Cup game is November 20th in Regina. All right, Forum Daily will be right back after the break. Up next, we have a discussion with the Canadian Health Coalition, so stay tuned. A good interview coming up next. A two-day meeting between all 13 of Canada's health ministers and their federal counterpart began in BC today. Federal Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos is expected to hear the minister's call for additional funding and supports. This comes 4 months after Canada's premiers met in Victoria last July to ask Ottawa to increase the Canada Health Transfer. Provincial health officials continue to show a united front of frustration over what they call a crumbling healthcare system. All right, well, joining us now to talk more on Canada's struggling healthcare system and what needs to be done about it is Mr. Stephen Staples, the Canadian Health Coalition's National Director of Policy and Advocacy. Mr. Staples, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for inviting me.
So a lot's been thrown at Canada's healthcare system throughout the past 2.5 years, sir, from the peak of the pandemic, a mental health crisis, a toxic drug crisis, so much being thrown at the healthcare system. How is it functioning right now?
Well, we're not out of the crisis yet, and it is hard to understate the results of the pandemic. We've lost so many healthcare workers from burnout that's increased wait times, and there's still issues of funding. And now we have some provinces talking about going more to the private sector, which is quite alarming to a lot of people. So there's no shortage of issues for the provincial and federal health ministers to be talking about this week.
No shortage of issues indeed, sir. Now, ministers are calling for additional funding, we mentioned, but this is not the first time that officials have asked for financial support in the health sector, particularly when it comes to the Canada Health Transfer. So how has Ottawa reacted in the past to these requests?
Well, you got it. The Canada Health Transfer is the big bulk of money that goes from the federal government to the provincial government for healthcare. It's over $40 billion and it's tied to inflation, so it goes up. So as inflation goes up, so does the amount of money that goes to the provinces. Now, the provinces complain that the amount is not enough and that they shoulder way more in terms of a percentage of public healthcare costs than the federal government has, and they want more. The federal government has been saying and continues to say, we're prepared to give you more money, but we want to see outcomes. We think it's reasonable to ask, what are you going to do with it? Will Canadians actually see an improvement of healthcare if we give you more money? The province's response has been, butt out. Healthcare is our responsibility. Just write us a blank check. And there you've got the standoff between the federal government that will give money but wants better outcomes, or at least to know what the outcomes are. And the provinces are saying, give us the money. We know what's best. Trust us to do what's right with provincial healthcare programs.
And we know the provinces are pushing for a meeting with the Prime Minister regarding the Canada Health Transfer. So how do you expect health ministers to achieve this goal through this week's meeting with Jean-Yves Duclos?
Well, we're looking for any kind of thawing or any kind of progress with Jean-Yves Duclos. I did notice that BC Health Minister Adrian Dix, who's chairing the meetings for these 2 days, did seem to distinguish between his relationship with Jean-Yves Duclos, the health minister. He's from Quebec City. He's an academic. He's quite approachable. And he seems to have a better relationship with Duclos. And he contained more of his chagrin, I would say, for the Prime Minister himself, pointing more fingers at the Prime Minister. So I think Jean-Yves Duclos is going to this meeting. It's the first meeting of its kind since the beginning of the pandemic. And hopefully he's going to find at least maybe even some non-monetary ways that they can work together, get the information sharing, data gathering, something like that, to begin to build the relationship. And then some money discussions will come later on. But there's still a lot of work left to be done.
Lots to keep our eyes on. A quick minute left here, Mr. Staples. But in addition to funding, what kind of additional supports and measures are health ministers going to be calling for?
Well, I think that's going to be primarily what they're looking for. They're looking for funding. They want to keep healthcare under their own purview, so they just want Ottawa to foot the bill. Certainly, Ottawa will be looking for outcomes, and especially new programs. We have a dental care program that's coming online as a result of this phenomenal agreement between the NDP and the Liberals, which is delivering new healthcare programs. So pharmacare is coming down the line, which will impact provinces to some degree. But also, we've been looking for a national pharmacare program so that people can have the cost of their prescription medicine covered, and so it's not dependent on whether they've got private insurance or a big credit card balance available or anything like that. That drugs should be covered under our national program, and we'd like the federal government to pick that up as well. So we hope that that'll be part of the conversation.
All right, Mr. Staples, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
My pleasure.
We'll be right back. The U.S. midterm elections are set for tomorrow, and election security officials are expressing concerns over threats to the nation's voting systems. And the task of protecting those systems has become increasingly more difficult. That's partly because millions of Americans embrace unfounded conspiracy theories about supposed election rigging. Election officials are watching for harassment, intimidation, and even physical violence at polling places and elections offices. And making matters worse, global rivals are expected to deepen disinformation efforts. With us now to discuss the state of misinformation and disinformation as U.S. elections draw near is Dr. Hee Kim, Assistant Professor of Communication at the University of Arizona. Dr. Kim, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me.
Now, security officials are expressing concerns around these kind of threats becoming more complex. So in what ways have these online threats evolved throughout the years?
Yeah, today misinformation comes in forms that are more appealing to people, yet are more difficult to be reviewed for its accuracy. So first, more and more information is spreading in the forms of videos. So these videos are more challenging to review than text-based content. However, videos are more likely to be recalled, evoke emotion, and persuade people because they often come with attention-grabbing images and sound. And relatedly, there are deep fakes, videos that have been manipulated to make false content look real, for instance. There are deep fakes of politicians and celebrities saying or doing things that they did not. And lastly, a lot of misinformation is produced not just in English, but also in Spanish or French, for instance. So misinformation is harder to detect when they are in subtitles, for instance.
Some very interesting and concerning information there, Doctor. Now, how do the different social media platforms stack up when it comes to fighting misinformation?
Yeah, great question. So social media platforms such as Facebook Meta, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube have largely three policies to fight misinformation. Often by working with third-party fact checkers, they first suspend users who are known to spread misinformation extensively. And second, they also flag posts containing misinformation, including false information about how and when to vote, for instance. And third, social media platforms try to reduce the visibility of misinformation using algorithms before they go viral. The thing is that their plans for dealing with misinformation in this year's US midterm elections are not very different from their 2020 plans. And experts have noted that their 2020 plans were not thorough enough.
And to add to all of this, there's concerns around disinformation from foreign powers, including Russia and China. So, can you tell our viewers the difference between disinformation and misinformation, especially ahead of the elections?
Yes. Misinformation and disinformation are both false information, but they differ by intention. So, misinformation is false or misleading information that results from unintentional inaccuracy. However, disinformation is false information intentionally designed to mislead people.
All right. And so, in terms of the voters watching us right now, both in the US and Canada, how can they differentiate and protect themselves against consuming or spreading misinformation or disinformation, especially during election periods?
Yeah, first, we can pay attention to the source of the information, specifically if the source is legitimate and has a reputation for good journalism and accuracy. So in case you're not sure, you can consult fact checkers like FactCheck.org or PolitiFact, among others, when you come across potentially false information. Second, we can watch out for provocative headlines. We can read a little further before believing or sharing a story, and especially look for supporting evidence in the story. Also, one pattern we see is that some misinformation stories are recycled, meaning that they are dated and they are not relevant anymore today. So look for that pattern. And finally, we need to check our own confirmation biases too. So as humans, we like to readily believe information that's in line with our own views, while we tend to discount information that we do not agree with. So we need to try to stay objective and look for facts.
Lots to consider there. Dr. Kim, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thanks again.
Stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after a short break. And when we return, we're going to be taking a look at the major news stories and headlines from around the world. The UN's COP27 climate change conference begins. Peace talks continue between Ethiopia and Tigray. China's trade drops in October. Olive production declines in Spain. And Elon Musk threatens to permanently ban users from Twitter who impersonate others. So stay tuned. Forum Daily will be right back in a moment. Stay with us. More than 100 of the world's leaders have gathered in Egypt to discuss the Earth's biggest challenges. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is urging nations to cooperate in solving the climate crisis. Mr. Guterres says a solidarity pact may be necessary to help emerging economies speed up their move toward renewable energies. This while combating climate change through global cooperation. The summit will be heavily dominated by leaders of nations that are victimized by climate change. Meanwhile, a new round of talks has begun between Ethiopia's government and Tigray regional representatives. This to work out military and other details of last week's signings of a permanent cessation of hostilities. This in a conflict thought to have killed hundreds of thousands of people. The meetings in Kenya, starting Monday, involve the military commanders of both sides, along with the lead political negotiators. An official familiar with the talks says they are expected to continue through Wednesday. Congo's military says some 3,000 people have stepped forward to join the military's fight against M23 rebels in the country's east. Tensions have mounted as the M23 rebels have advanced in recent weeks, seizing several key towns. Congo's government has blamed Rwanda and expelled the Rwandan ambassador about a week ago. Representatives from the two countries met over the weekend in Angola, and other peace talks are expected to resume in Nairobi, Kenya next week. The Rwandan government, which has repeatedly denied supporting M23, said Monday that a Congolese fighter plane had violated Rwandan airspace by landing briefly at an airport. Well, more than 6 months after Russian forces retreated from the towns around the Ukrainian capital, residents of the region are still struggling to rebuild their lives. An estimated 1 million people have returned to the Kyiv area, but many no longer have jobs and cannot afford to fix their houses. They say they need more assistance, especially as winter grows closer. The Ukrainian government is struggling to carry out the most urgent repairs to civilian homes. This comes as nearly $350 billion is needed for reconstruction across the war-ravaged country. Turning to China now, where trade shrank in October as global demand weakened and antivirus controls weighed on domestic consumer spending. Forecasters expected Chinese trade to weaken following interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve and other central banks to rein in surging inflation. Chinese demand has been hurt by a zero-COVID strategy that has repeatedly shut down large sections of cities to contain virus outbreaks. An extremely hot and dry summer is now threatening the hardiest of Spain's staple crops, the olive. Industry experts and authorities predict Spain's fall olive harvest will be nearly half the size of last year's, which is another casualty of global weather shifts caused by climate change. High temperatures in May killed many of the blossoms on the olive trees in Spanish orchards. The ones that survived produced fruits that were small and thin because of not enough water. But a little less moisture can actually yield better olive oil. However, the recent drought is proving too much for them. Spain is a world leader in olive oil production. Billionaire Elon Musk says Twitter will permanently suspend any account on the social media platform that impersonates someone else. Twitter's new owner issued the warning on Sunday after some celebrities changed their Twitter display names and not their account names to Elon Musk. It comes in reaction to the billionaire's decision to offer verified accounts to all comers for $8 per month. Actor Valerie Bertinelli and comedian Kathy Griffin both sent spoof tweets saying that they were Elon Musk. Jimmy Kimmel is ready to host the Oscars again. Mr. Kimmel will be returning to the awards show, completing a trilogy that started with him presiding over the chaotic envelope gate ceremony. Mr. Kimmel has hosted the show twice before in 2017. Now, this was when he managed the final moments in which the wrong Best Picture winner was called, and then the following year, which came just months into the Me Too reckoning. A rare North Atlantic right whale has been identified off the southeast coast of Newfoundland. Marine mammal scientist Jack Lawson says the whale was spotted by Cape Race lighthouse keeper Clifford Duran. Mr. Duran posted several pictures to social media showing the whale leaping out of the water. Scientists said last month that the whale's worldwide population had fallen to about 340 as of last year. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website and make sure to follow us on our social media accounts. We're available on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.